welcome to all of you. For some of you, this journal club may be the first of the saga teaching. And so I'll give you a brief background about how we go about it. We've been doing it for many years like this. We choose a topic, and the topic usually is chosen depending on its relevance and its message that it gives. And it's usually selected by consultation between the presenter, who is a student, and a mentor. As it happens today, Saurav Majumdar is the presenter and I'm the mentor for this. So both of us get together and he prepares a PPT which gives you the summary of the article and manages a critique. And before he gives his critique, for which I have also given inputs, the audience will be involved in giving their critique of the paper. And Saurav will have also done some collateral reading. And in the end, we'll all join together, say which critique is logical, which critique which may not be that logical, whatever, and come to some consensus and see what we should do in the light of the information that is given in this article. That is the purpose of this journal club. And the important thing is that all of you must have read that article in detail. We usually send it 1 week in advance, which we have done to all the groups that we put the URL to. We also sent it again as a reminder yesterday and some this morning. So let us see how many of you have really read it. It's difficult for me to take a poll now, but let's hope that most of you have read it, because you will get the best out of this journal club only if you have read it. If you have not read the main article, what Saurav is going to say in the form of a summary is not going to help you very much. So if some of you have not read it, for the next journal club, please bear this in mind. Read it well, make notes about your critique, and then come into this club, come into this discussion so that you get the best out of this discussion. Thank you again, all of you, for joining. And Saurav, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everyone. Today, this month's journal club is on the closure of a facial defect during laparoscopic umbilical hernia repair, a randomized clinical trial. This paper was published by Mr. Christopherson, and in the British Journal of Surgery. The paper was accepted in December of 2019 and was published in February 2020. The repair of an umbilical hernia is one of the most frequently conducted elective GI surgical procedures. Irrespective of the surgical techniques, there are many clinical challenges to optimize the treatment. The postoperative pain, readmissions, wound-related complications, surgical site infection, hematoma, and seroma formations are one of the important challenges that are associated with this surgery. There are also conflicting data about postoperative patient-reported outcomes, such as pain, movement limitations, and the quality of life. We will look into this paper with the main hypothesis that the closure of facial defect to try and reduce the recurrence could increase early postoperative pain due to increased tissue strain after the closure of the defect. So this was a multi-center RCT, and it was approved by the local ethical committee. The consort guidelines were followed, and the study recruitment was between December of 2013 and August of 2016. All the patients who were consecutively referred to these places were screened for inclusion. Patient scheduled for elective ambulatory laparoscopic repair of the umbilical hernia at any of the 3 university hospitals were taken for the study. Any patient between the age of 18 to 80 years with the preoperative facial defect of 2 to 6 centimeters, which was assessed clinically, were taken for the study. The defect size was checked during the surgery, but if it was more than 6 centimeters, this was not a reason for exclusion. The patient with concomitant rectus diastasis were also included. Patients with recurrent umbilical hernia previously repaired with sutures could also be included. When we look at the exclusion criteria, patients with chronic pain syndrome or with liver cirrhosis, childbirth grade B or C, or with presence of severe comorbidities, ASA grade 3 or above, or expected poor compliance, that is foreign language, drug or alcohol abuse, or patient with previous mesh umbilical hernia repair were excluded from the study. Patient who had more than one periumbilical facial defect, those participating in any other studies were also not included. Patient with a small umbilical hernia, that is between 0.5 to 2 centimeter defect size, which was evaluated clinically, were scheduled for open repair and thus not included in the study. So I will come to my first critique. Anyone who has any doubts regarding this?
No, for the audience, can what I'll do is call out people whom I do not know. Okay, so please unmute yourself, introduce yourself so that we can get to know each other, and then you can give your comments. Okay, Navya, can you introduce yourself and tell us about what you think about the study so far? Are you there, Navya? I see that you have unmuted, but you have not responded. Can you hear me? Okay, I see a Farooq Khatib.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, kindly introduce yourself, sir, and then.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Farooq, sir, from Aster Hospital,
Yeah.
consultant surgeon.
Yeah. So, do you have any comments about what you think of this paper in terms of its novelty or the research question that they have asked? Or in this design, in the inclusion and exclusion criteria?
It's a good study, sir.
Okay.
I read. So I think later we will tell all the drawbacks of this study, like so many other, because it was a, there are so many exclusion criteria were there. Those
That's
who
what
prefer more than 6 centimeter.
I'm asking you, requesting you, in your mind,
Sir.
do you have any drawbacks as far as the inclusion and exclusion criteria are concerned?
No, sir.
Ravi, you have anything to add?
I think from a cohort of about 500 odd patients, they have narrowed it down to 80 patients, which I think is, but they have had strict criteria in terms of the size of the umbilical hernia defect and whom not to include. So you can't really criticize it, but
Okay.
it would have been better if you had 500 odd patients, the sample size should have been a bit better than maybe 80.
Okay. Shivram, any comments?
No, it's not clear how they have measured the site. To exclude the criteria, they have said the size of the defect.
Yes.
But what I read the paper, they have measured the size intraoperatively. How can
So
they
that was later, sir.
exclude? Yeah, but now to exclude, no
Yeah.
criteria.
Yeah, you will see that's very important. Their measurement was only clinical. And so
Yeah.
it was one of our objections to the study as well. Saurav, please continue.
Okay.
Sir, but maybe they
Go
have
on, go on. Just
actually
hold
done
on, hold on, hold on.
Maybe they have done an ultrasound.
One nimsha. Don't show it now, Saurav. Go
Okay,
back.
sorry, sir. Sorry.
Let Ravi finish his comment and then you show it. Go on, Ravi.
Okay, sir.
Sir, maybe they have, like we do, maybe they have done an ultrasound scan, but they have actually not commented on it. I think that is,
but
you can't take. Yeah.
They should have highlighted that, Ravi. If it was the case, when your case,
Correct,
the two in a known trial, they should have converted that. So we have a list of fors and against this paper. So we will put it up to you now. Saurav will explain, and if you others have any objection to what we have said, you can do that. Yes, Ramakrishna.
Hello. Yeah, sir. The primary endpoint is the pain on post-operative day 1.
Yes.
Is it really relevant?
Very good question.
Because pain.
Yeah. Go on.
That is the main primary endpoint they have mentioned, and based on that only all calculation, sample size calculation, everything is done. And I don't think it is a very important and relevant outcome, because anyway patient will be having pain and you can control it with various drugs and
Correct.
various other methods. So they should have concentrated much more on chronic pain and other things.
Very, very true.
Which
And you will
eventually
see
will
that is
come
one of our comments. Very true. Very true. Go on, Saurabh.
Yes, sir. So this is a recent article, and it is a relevant topic, that is against tension-free concept.
What is? Can you explain
from a
what that
journal.
is? Do it slowly. There is no hurry. If we
Yes.
overshoot the time, I request all the participants to log in again with the same link so that we can continue this nicely. You have to say something about what is against this tension-free concept. Can I involve Mauti Karuna? Please introduce yourself and say what we mean by this against tension-free concept. Can you unmute, please? Mauti Karuna. Does anybody else know who it is, and can they? I'm calling out these names because I'm not familiar with them. All right, I'll call a familiar name, Vanita.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. What is this concept, tension-free concept?
Sir, here we are using mesh, sir.
Yeah.
So in both the groups.
See,
Like-
for decades, the teaching has been that if you stitch together a hernial defect, because of the tension, it tears through and there's a high recurrence rate. And the whole
Yes.
concept of a mesh repair came because you do not want to close a defect. You bridge it with a mesh so that
Yes.
fibrous tissue grows through the interstices of the mesh, and you have a so-called tension-free repair, and so the recurrence will be lower. Okay, that has been the teaching for decades, and now the concept seems to be going back again, with the AWR concept that is coming up, IPOM plus, and this is an IPOM plus, as it were. So people are again going back to the concept of stitching up the defect, even if there is tension. There are some surgeons who are saying even if you can't approximate the edges, you approximate it as much as possible. Okay, it will reduce the seroma and things like that. So we are actually reversing decades-old teaching concept, and so it becomes important when something radical like this is being pushed. It becomes important that we look at the data to see whether that concept is correct or not. That is why it is a relevant topic and it's going against conventional thinking, and so we should give it importance and look at the data carefully. That is the meaning there. Okay, go on, Saurabh.
So it has a well-structured hypothesis it has good selection of the patient, that is 2 to 6 centimeter defect site. It has been well defined. It has been approved by the ethical committee, and it follows the CONSORT guidelines of RCT reporting. The sample size, as Ravi Shankar sir had pointed out already, with a large initial eligibility criteria of 568 patients, only 80 patients were ultimately randomized for the trial. So when we come to the study design.
Hello.
Yeah. Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Sample size, we can't say it is a against point, because he has calculated the sample size based on the primary outcome. And for that, he has given justification also. And even if you try to recalculate, we get around 74 patients, and he has taken 80 patients. So sample size is not a against finding for this. But if you are considering other factors like recurrence and other things, then sample size becomes less. Otherwise, for that primary endpoint, this is correct sample size.
Yeah, you're quite right. But we are in the subsequent thing after the results and in the end, we are going to make the point that you made Ramakrishna, whether this is something that is clinically relevant or not. Okay, that's the point we're going to make further on. For that, we feel that the sample size is very small, because he would have he justifies a small sample size by pushing a large difference between the two groups, and that may not be very correct. That is the point we're trying to make. Go on.
Sir, one more thing, sir.
Yeah.
So when they are taking that the umbilical hernia defect 2 to 6 centimeter, they have measured it only clinically and they excluded less than 2 centimeter.
Yeah.
So there are all the chances that they have included 1.5 or 2.5 centimeter into either of the groups.
Yes,
So
yes.
that will be against point, no, sir?
You're right. We mentioned that, and Shivaram mentioned that as well, that just clinical estimate of the defect size is a defect in this protocol, we feel. Yeah. Go on, sir.
Yes. Sir. So, study dedicated experienced laparoscopic surgeons performed the hernia repairs. Before the start of the study, each surgeon had performed more than 30 intercorporeally sutured laparoscopic hernia repairs. A uniform surgical technique, including intercorporeal suture method, was agreed at a consensus meeting and maintained through a standard video recording and written instruction. The abdominal cavity was insufflated to 12 millimeters mercury by a Veress needle, and a 12 millimeter trocar was placed along the left side lateral to the mid-clavicular line, that is the Palmer's point. Additionally, one 5 millimeter trocar and one 12 millimeter trocar were placed in the vertically line downwards. Adhesiolisis was performed as needed, and the defect area was cleared of all fatty tissues. And the falciform ligament was detached if it was necessary to make space for the mesh. Under intraperitoneal pressure of 6 to 8 millimeters, that reduced the pressure, the maximum diameter of the defect was measured during the surgery using a disposable ruler. The largest defect diameter was used to determine the mesh size. The hernia sac was not excised. If randomized to intervention, defect was closed, incorporating the hernia sac, subcutis, and the facial edges using non-absorbable interrupted sutures, that is Ethibond. The sutures were placed 0.5 to 1 centimeters from the facial edges with 0.5 to 1 centimeter distance between the stitches. Suturing was performed at an intraperitoneal pressure of 6 to 8 millimeters, guided by a laparoscopic knot pusher. Patients in the no closure group underwent an identical surgical technique without closure of the defect. In both groups, a fitted physiomesh by Ethicon was placed in at least a 5 centimeter overlap corresponding to the largest diameter of the open defect. The mesh was double crown fixed with non-absorbable tackers with approximately 2 centimeters between each tack. Mesh fixation was performed under interperitoneal pressure of 6 to 8 millimeters. The 10 millimeter facial trocar side defect was closed with absorbable polydiaxone, and the skin was closed with nylon sutures. Patients were instructed to wear a fitted abdominal elastic binder continuously for 7 days after the surgery. When we look at the anesthesia and analgesia that was used during the procedure, at the induction of anesthesia, 16 millimeter methylprednisolone succinate and 1500 milligram cefuroxime were given intravenously. Patients were anesthetized using propofol 3 to 5 milligrams per kg and ramifentanil. At the end of the hernia repair, pain was controlled with sufentanil and ketorolac administered intravenously, and 10 ml of bupivacaine 0.5% was administered into the trocar site. A surgeon administered transabdominal transverse abdominal plane block, that is the TAP block, under laparoscopic guidance with 30 ml bupivacaine after mesh fixation before the end of the operation, and 10 ml in the trocar incision sites. In the post-anesthesia care unit, patient was controlled with morphine administered until the score on the visual analog scale was less than 20. In the post-anesthesia care unit, postoperative nausea and vomiting was treated with intravenous ondansetron on request. At discharge, the patients were given pre-packed envelopes with paracetamol 1000 mg and ibuprofen 400 mg to be taken 4 times daily for the first 5 days, and 5 rescue opioid tablets, that is morphine 10 mg, were packed for self-administration if needed. Several intraoperative assessments, such as the duration of surgery, number of tackers that were used, mesh size, and the defect size were recorded. Several post-operative patient-related outcome measurements, including the pain, were registered by the patient themselves before the surgery and on post-operative day 1, 2, 3, 7, and 30. Seroma formation quality of life and the cosmesis were assessed at day 30 and 2 years of follow-up. Recurrence, that is clinical and or reoperation and for chronic pain were assessed after 2 years of operation. Seroma formation was assessed clinically and the quality of life recorded using the validated Carolinas Comfort Scale. The cosmesis assessed at day 30 was recorded using the verbal rating scale and the numerical rating scale. Recurrence, either clinical or reoperation, quality of life, cosmesis, and chronic pain was assessed at 2 years of follow-up by a telephonic interview and clinical examination. For your reference, I had put up the Carolina Comfort Scale for anyone who doesn't know about it. And the numerical rating scale and the verbal description scale, which they were talking about, is basically a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is where they have no or minimal complaints, and 10 is where they have the maximum amount of complaints. So the primary endpoint of the study was pain during activity, that is mobilization from supine to sitting on POD1. Patients recorded pain before and after the surgery at the site of hernia repair using a VAS. That's the score which ranged from 0 to which meant no pain to 100, which is the worst imaginable pain.
Do it a little faster. Do it a little faster. You know, people will have read this. Just give the highlights. Guide the highlight. Otherwise, we not have any time for discussion. Please run through a little bit.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Patients also recorded in a logbook the total number of rescue opiates that was used during the POD 1 to 7 period.
Go to the next slide. Go to the next slide.
Okay.
Pain was the main thing.
Sir.
Yeah. Secondary endpoint.
Yes, sir. So secondary endpoints, that was the outcomes which was measured in the day 2 to 7, was registered by the patients themselves before the surgery and on POD 2, 3, 7, and 30, which included movement limitations from range 0 to 100, discomfort from 0 to 100, and fatigue.
Yeah.
At day 30, all patients had a clinical examination. Seroma formation was evaluated clinically by a blinded study physician who had no idea about the patient. Defined as a palpable fluid swelling at the site of previous hernia, which was a yes or no question. Abdominal CT was conducted when the clinical examination was inconclusive. The quality of life was assessed using the Carolina scale that I mentioned before. Satisfaction with the cosmetic results was measured using the visual reference scale, and oral satisfaction, that is not satisfied but acceptable, or satisfied or very satisfied. This was the final grading of their response. When we look at the outcome after 2 years, at the end of 2 years of follow-up, patient received a telephonic phone call from a blinded primary investigator using a structured questionnaire which was prepared before.
Yeah. Go to the next slide. Go to the next slide. Go to the next slide.
Sir.
Everybody has read this and we need time for discussion. Go on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So randomization was done by a sealed opaque envelope method, that is block randomization in blocks of 4 via randomization.com. Envelopes were prepared before the start of the study.
Next slide.
Okay. So this sample size?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next slide. Yeah.
Okay.
Next slide.
Outcome data. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Next slide. Because you will not finish the presentation at this rate. Please understand. Now, critic, go back one slide. Because please understand, yes, everybody would have read this. Okay. Now, can I bring Shivaram in? You have raised your hand.
Sir, I have a question for.
One sec. Shivaram, can everybody mute their mics, please? I see a lot of background noise. I can't individually mute people. All right, please mute. Everybody mute, except the person who is talking, please. Please mute your mics. There's a lot of background noise. Shivaram, can you please come in, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to mute. Lot of noise. I'm trying to mute. Yeah, go on.
I was actually asking Dr. Ramakrishna about sample size.
Yeah, please.
Anyway, that will discuss.
No, we can do that, Shivaram, now. Let us cover
Okay.
No problem.
So can we ask Ramakrishna to explain everybody how do you
calculate the sample size?
Yeah.
Really, Ramakrishna.
Yeah. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Yeah, sample size calculation is always based on the primary outcome. So this author has kept the primary outcome as the pain on POD 1. Actually, that is a defect. He should have based it on the recurrence and long-term outcome. So we have to accept whatever he has done. So with this, I have shown one website link to sample size calculator. There, if you give the inputs like comparative two independent groups, then this outcome is a continuous variable, and he has described based on a previous study that the outcome would be the expected outcome is 57 and 74. For 57, he has given a standard deviation as plus or minus 26. So if you input all these parameters to the sample size calculators, it gives 74. I think if you can, I think Dr. Lakshman that day he had shown it.
We have
in the
shown once, we'll show it
workshop.
again, Shiva. We'll actually,
If you want, we can show it now.
Time agatte iga. We'll
No problem.
show it to you. We'll show it to
We'll
you.
look in.
We'll show it.
Yeah. So
Can I-
basically
can I-
on the
Yeah.
outcome. Yeah.
We will run out of time soon, so please log in again if we are interrupted in the middle. Can I bring in Mahesh Channappa, please?
Yeah. Hello, sir. Dr.
Hi.
Mahesh here from, hello, sir.
Yeah.
From Aster CMI Hospital.
You had a question.
Hello.
How do you measure
Yeah,
the
I have a-
chronic fatigue? Yeah.
Chronic fatigue, 0 to 100 is a big variable.
Yeah.
So how they were analyzing, I was not sure. I went
Yeah.
through the paper and there was no explanation about it because it's a big
Correct.
variable from 0 to 100.
Yeah.
And it is subjective also. So is there any, like measure or number to,
My
put in the
own,
statistics?
my own reading was that there was some kind of a scale similar to a visual analog scale, which they have not explained in that paper. That was the only
Okay, sir.
thing I presumed. that. Anybody else has
Okay.
anything else to add to that? Yes, Ravi?
Sir, I think they had Niranjan here.
Yeah.
I think
Niranjan.
they have mentioned that they have done a trial paper for
Yeah.
starting the study, and
Yeah.
they have mentioned that they have discussed the methods in detail in that paper, and we have to probably look into that paper to find out it in
Probably.
detail.
But
about it.
anyway, in this paper, that information is not there.
Yes.
Now, my request is, I
Sir,
can't
I
see, one sec, please let me. I can't see everybody raising their hands, even on this, because I need to keep on checking. There are a lot of people. So I suggest that if you have anything, kindly put it in the chat box. I'm actively looking at the chat box, and I will bring you in time to time. So please remember to type it into the chat box. And if I see, I will call you. Otherwise, I may miss seeing your raised hands. Abdul, please come in and ask your question.
So I just have a question. Regarding the satisfaction and all, they have based it on NRS and VRS score. That is a visual score,
Yes.
where score point and the patient has to point using that scale, using a finger has to move along the line
Yes.
and tell which score is it.
Yeah.
So the satisfaction and all is based on that score. And I have one question for Saurav.
Yeah.
What is a physio mesh?
The physio mesh is a special type of mesh, sir. It has got that dual properties with folding on the outer edges, sir. I've seen that. I went through their site, sir. It has got some folding, sir.
It's a composite mesh with
Composite,
rolling,
yes, sir.
and it is diagonally based with markings where you can put the tackles.
But what I have understood is that has been now removed from the market.
Yes,
for
sir.
some problem
Yes,
with it. Okay. But this study was done before it was removed from the market. Okay.
Yes.
Was
Fine.
Mahesh again asks, was there a universal protocol guided excision of sac recommended? I'm not with it. Mahesh, can you please talk about it? If you have a lot of typing to do.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So the SAC excision, different people do it in a different way.
Yeah.
So since there's so many surgeons were involved and there is no protocol mentioned that it has to be done in a particular way,
No,
whether the entire SAC
Let
has
me
to be-
stop you. Let me stop you. They were very
That
clear.
was not excised.
SAC was not excised it was included in the stitch where they took the two edges. And so it was sort of inverted like that. And they go out of the way to clearly specify, which is a good point, that all the surgeons were doing the same technique. Same technique. And the randomization was done after the defect was measured. After the defect was measured on the table. All right. Ravi, did you raise your hand?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please type it in because I may not see you the next time. So
Yeah.
please. Yeah,
Okay. 2 points.
Yeah.
One is I wanted to know how many of us give methylprednisolone before the surgery, because I think this is a new thing. I've never done that before.
Yeah.
Other thing is this 2 rows of tackers. I think in India, whether it is due to financial reasons or whatever, I don't think anybody does that regularly. 2 rows of tackers 1 centimeter apart. I think it's quite expensive to do that.
Yeah.
Does anyone practice? Dr. Shivram may want to answer that question.
No, this was a double crown technique, which was earlier advocated. Many people have given it up now because most of the surgeons have gone to do some suturing, some tackers, and also most of the people now put the absorbable tacker. So this was 4 or 5 years ago study. I think that time they were doing the double crown technique.
Yeah. Ramakrishna makes a point. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, my objection, one is body mass index was very important in all these hernia patients. I don't see anywhere they have measured the BMI of these patients. Imaging, I already told. And what you said, methylprednisolone, there is a discrepancy. Post-operatively, they say dexamethasone. And the pre-operatively, they have said 16 mg of methylprednisolone given.
Oh, I missed that. Okay.
Also, there is a discrepancy. They say that 12 mm port 2 and 5 mm port 1. And when they are closing the defect, they say 10 mm port was spatial closure was done for the 10 mm port. So that also is not correct.
Not clear there. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, body mass index they have mentioned, sir.
Yeah.
It is
Yes,
compared
yes.
and there is no difference between this group. They have mentioned 24 and 27.
Yeah. That's
It
right.
is there in the
Okay.
table 1.
Table 1. Okay, then I missed that. Right.
Yeah. Mahesh again, Mahesh asked if the mesh was withdrawn. How did the ethical committee approve it? It was all done. It was withdrawn after all the study was done, and the ethical committee would have approved before the study started. Shrikant's question: what is the criteria for 6 to 8 millimeters of mercury? To keep it as flat as possible, to bring the facial edges together. At the same time, have the minimum amount of space required for suturing. Okay, that's the thing. And Abdul talks about skin incision was 12 mm, fascia was 10 mm. Okay, you're clarifying what Shivaram has said. Okay, Saurav, can you proceed, please?
Yes. So it was a good study design. It was a double-blinded study with a good randomization and follow-up. It was standardized procedure that they had included experienced surgeons, good endpoints and metrics, that is minimum of 2 years of follow-up, and good detailed definition of a recurrence, clinical plus CT when needed. In critique against, the defect size was assessed clinically. There was recurrent hernias without mesh was included into the study.
You have to explain what you mean by these. Just listing them and reading the list is not good enough. So defect size being clinical, that's the point that Prashant raised earlier. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So if they thought something was 2 centimeters and it was in fact 1.5, they would still have included them in the study. It may not have happened, but theoretically that was an issue. And again, the point that Shivaram made as well, they should have had some kind of an imaging to assess the size, defect size. Okay. So recurrent hernias without mesh included. So what is the issue there?
Yes.
Do you know why we included that list, that fact in the list?
No, sir.
Then you should have asked me when I was mentoring you. I deliberately didn't spoon feed you. So the idea is not for you to just write something that I say and read it out. That's not the idea. If you don't know, you always had time to ask me, 2 days. The point here is that if you have put stitches through something, they excluded the mesh ones, but they used the ones with sutures. But definitely a recurrence there means two things which will confound the study. One of them is that person may have had an inherent problem with his collagen. He's not a normal person because he got a reference. Second, if that suture had torn through the face while he's sharing the screen, let me continue what I was saying. So one of them is that the cohort might be, as I say, spoiled, if I can use that word, by people who have a poor collagen tissue and they can confound the results. And the second is that the previous suturing might have torn through, and that will again will weaken the defect. And that will also confound the factor. And that's why I made the point that recurrent hernias should not have been used in this at all. I would welcome the views from other people on this point.
Agreed. I think
Agreed.
that's a very valid point.
Yeah. And again, we are saying diastasis is a very separate topic by itself. You cannot include people in any study with or without diastasis in the same group. Umbilical hernia is very different from a diastasis situation. What you do with the diastasis, what you offer, and what are the outcomes, very different. And I thought that was another confounding factor. And another factor that they should not have included this group. And they are measuring the seroma without taking what has been a very traditionally accepted method of putting pressure on the sac when the sac is not excised. When you do an IPOM, for example, it is common to have a little plug there and strap it down for a week or so that because the sac is not excised, you do this pressure to reduce the seroma, and that would definitely reduce the incidence of seroma. So what they got in the result, which we will see later, might be because they didn't use the standard recommended thing that they should have done. Okay, and this is the point that we made, that Ramakrishna made long ago, that this is powered for pain and not for seroma or recurrence. And the endpoints, when you're looking at 2 years, is not really pain. It's the first post-op day, as the point was already made. They should have done the powering for seroma or recurrence. Okay, anybody disagree with these points or anything else to add, please?
No, they
Sir, I
have
have a-
said. Hello.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go on, Shriram.
CT during Valsalva maneuver was done to look for the recurrence.
Yeah.
Is it possible to do CT scan with Valsalva maneuver?
Yeah. See, just like somebody saying you hold your breath, they'll say you really blow out and hold. And that is Valsalva.
Hold. Okay.
Yeah. And Nishant has the point, how does diastasis play a role in recurrence or seroma? It definitely has a role in seroma because people with diastasis have very weak abdominal wall. All right, they have practically no abdominal wall in that sense. And so it's not like closing the fascia of a normal person without diastasis. That is why it adds to recurrence. It may not add to seroma. I'm not talking about seroma there, but I was talking about recurrence. Okay, does that answer you, Nishant? All right, so go on, Saurabh. Go to the next section, please.
Sir, and diastasis adds to the post-operative pain also if they have repaired.
Yeah, but they have not repaired in this. They have not done. See, what I presume they have done is they have dealt with the umbilical hernia and not done anything about the repair of the diastasis. But they never mentioned anything about the repair of the
Yes,
diastasis.
they are not very clear what they did with the diastasis, although they have included.
Yeah.
Sir, one more.
One sec, Saurabh. Ravi, help. Yeah.
Sir, though the study has been powered for the primary endpoint, which is pain, but they have actually shown, even with the number of patients they have done, that the difference in terms of recurrence and chronic pain and seroma formation, the difference is statistically significant. So
the point is that cannot be believed.
Yeah,
that's the point.
I think that,
yeah. Okay, go on.
One more point from my side, sir.
Yeah.
We said there is no plug or pressure dressing, but they have
Yes.
actually recommended the use of an abdominal binder for 7 days.
Yeah.
So can this be considered as an alternate for that as per their protocol?
It cannot, you see, because you don't, binder is flat on the stomach. It doesn't have a plug. In the kind of pressure that we put, the plug is the operative element. And the bandage is there only to hold the plug in place. So if you put something flat without a plug, it doesn't work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
And
Sir, in the secondary outcome,
one sec. Why don't you just type it in? Why type it in so that we don't have to clash our
Yes, sir,
topics?
sure.
Type your questions in. Yeah. Variable assessments for seroma is what Ramakrishna says. And that's true. Variable assessment. Heli Ramakrishna, you have something to add to that?
Yes, sir. The assessment criteria, whenever we say outcome measurement, it should be standardized and all patients in both the groups should be assessed in the same way.
Yeah.
Here, for some patients, they have done telephonic assessment. Some patients clinically examined. Some patients undergone CT scan. And there is no quantification of seroma. 1 ml seroma is equivalent to 10 ml seroma.
Yeah.
It's like that. So this type of outcome measurement is not acceptable in RCTs.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. Okay. Recurrence assessed in telephone follow-up, sir? Prashant, come in and say what you have to say. Yeah.
sir, in the secondary outcome at the end of second year, sir,
Yeah.
they have asked in the telephone where the quality of life, chronic pain and recurrence. How valid that point, sir? How
It
can
is
the patient can say?
See, it is valid. If the person didn't have a lump, there is neither seroma nor a recurrence. If the patient had a lump, they got him back and did a CT and confirmed. That is reasonable. Abdul says giving oral morphine as add-on should be avoided as better and safe analgesics are available. Abdul, this is a highly debated point. Over in the West, they still use narcotics in a very large quantity, and that is considered standard there. Okay? They do
Okay,
not,
sir.
yeah,
Okay, sir.
they're in fact, not giving enough analgesia is a criminal offense. The people sue you for it. They are very strong about post-op pain. That's why they use narcotic analgesics.
Yes,
Go
sir.
on,
And
go-
one more thing.
Yeah, go on.
Sir, the bupivacaine as laparoscopic, they have made it standard for everyone, 30
Yeah.
ml.
Yeah.
But it should be based on the kg and the BMI.
Yes, that's a point. But we also made the point that there wasn't a great variation in the BMI in the studies population.
Yes.
Okay, that was also made. Go on, Saurabh.
So if we look at the consort diagram, initial 568 patients were included, which after exclusion, only randomized 80 patients were there in 40 patients in each group. However, at the analysis at day 30, the one of the group had 40 patients, while 2 patients were declined to participate in the study. And at 2 years of follow-up, 4 patients were lost to follow-up in the
Basically, Saurabh, I'm
treatment
sorry, I'm cutting you. I don't mean to be rude,
Yes, sir.
but you don't
Yes,
have to
sir.
explain so much. What you have to say is the consort diagram shows that they have been very fair and square in declaring all the events of the recruitment process. That's all.
Okay. Okay.
That's all. Go on, next one. Because we're trying to save time,
So-
because I really don't want to go well beyond 1 hour. You know, this 2.5 hour discussion is useless. Let's have good discussion, but let us finish the session in 1 hour. Please go on.
So if we look at either of the defect and non-defect group, the age and sex distributions are fairly equal.
Yes.
BMI, they have said that in the non-defect group, the BMI was a little more than the defect group. The ASA gradings were also similar and comparable, and the preoperative P1V was also similar. In the intraoperative variables, the defect size were equal in both the groups. Number of tacklers were also equal, and duration of surgery was larger in cases of defect closure group. The mesh diameter was also comparable. In cases of outcome for day 1, the pain on activity was more in case of defect closure group, and the rescue opioid use were more in case of defect closure group. And in day 30 of outcome, seroma formation was more in cases of non-defect closure group, and it was significant. And quality of life was 3.5 in cases of the defect closure group and 6 in cases of non-defect closure group.
Yeah. Saurabh, may I request you to kindly give only the significant ones?
Okay.
It's
okay.
done. You've all done it. Go to the next slide.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
There was no severe postoperative complications in either group. One patient in the closure group developed a chronic mesh cutaneous fistula 2 weeks after the hernia repair. No perforation of the skin was seen during the defect suturing, and the patient was treated conservatively with antibiotics. One patient in each group was readmitted with pain. The patient in the no closure group was reoperated on after day 1 because of severe pain. The laparoscopy was normal, but the patient had tack removal at the pain trigger points owing to the suspicion of intercostal nerve entrapment.
One
The
second,
acute pain
Saurav.
resolved within.
Saurav, I'm sorry,
Yes,
I
sir.
keep interrupting you, but don't
Yes,
get
sir.
me
Okay.
me wrong. Go to the previous slide.
Yes, sir.
Vanita, can I ask you what they mean by no perforation of the skin during defect suturing? I
They
just want to know
didn't,
they understood what it was. Yeah.
so while suturing the defect intracorporeally, they didn't
Yeah.
go through. Sir.
Why would they go through the skin when they're hitching the fascia? Saurav,
Diastasis
can
of
you? No, diastasis was not suture. It's only the defect.
Yes.
Saurav, do you know why that happened? Why are they talking about perforation of the skin?
So, when they are laparoscopically repairing the defect, they wanted to know if the fistula was extending up to the skin. Sir.
No. Please, the answer is this. If you look at the technique carefully, they not only took the edges, they also took the sac. Okay? Took the apex of the sac of the umbilical hernia and then took the defect on the other side. If they went too deep in getting the sac, they would go through the skin. So they make the point that we didn't go through the skin, we took only the sac at its apex. Okay? Next one.
Okay.
Yeah.
More patients in the no closure group contacted their general practitioners after surgery for minor problems such as constipation, pain, and seroma. No patient contacted the GP for wound infection. So if we look at the distribution of patient reported outcomes, that in the defect closure groups and the non-defect closure group, the VAS score was comparable, and even in the activity limitations, the discomfort level and the fatigue were comparable. The outcomes after two years of surgery, the cumulative recurrence rate in the non-defect closure group was significantly more. The quality of life score was similar in both the groups. Pain activity cosmesis were comparable in both the groups.
Yeah. Any comments so far?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
In the table 1, the last one, the defect size in centimeter, 2.5 in bracket, range from 1.5 to 4. Actually, in the exclusion criteria, anything less than 2 centimeter, they have told it is excluded.
Correct.
And here they are telling 1.5 centimeter is also included in this.
Yeah.
It was against the protocol.
Correct. And what was the size of the mesh used? Shrikant says they said they took the largest diameter of the defect on the table and gave a 5 centimeter
Minimum
5 centimeter extent beyond that size. So that has been defined. Shivaram asks, mesh size was decided before or after closing the defect? Before closing the defect. They measured the defect size and then randomized it into closure and non-closure group. So, and it was done before closing the defect. Any other critique, please?
So regarding Ramakrishna sir's question, sir.
Yes.
So that preoperatively they have taken the umbilical size defect 2 to 6 centimeter.
Yes.
Intraoperatively they again measure the defect, sir.
Correct.
Even though the defect is more than 6 centimeter, they still are included in the study.
Correct.
So intraoperatively some umbilical defects may be 1.5 centimeter.
Yeah.
So that's why
But
the
they have
range is
mentioned,
1.5 to 4.
no, my objection was not that. They have mentioned even if it is more than 6 centimeter, it is not excluded, they have said. But when they have not told if it is less than 2 centimeter, they are going to exclude or include. That they have not mentioned.
You got
How
that?
many patients in this group had that small set? It becomes a compounding variable, no?
Yes.
They have said 1.5 centimeter. If there are too many patients with 1.5 centimeter defect in the closure group, then the result naturally we expect it to
Will
be better
favor it.
here.
Yeah, will favor it. Yeah. Okay.
It will favor there.
Correct. Correct.
So it becomes a confounding variable when they have fixed the protocol as 2 to 4, 2 to 6.
But I had missed that 1.5 centimeters, to be honest. I hadn't noticed that. Okay. Now, Vanita says discrepancy in the p-value of fatigue in table and results. Okay. Is that the case? I had not noticed that. And Nishant makes a good point.
No.
Sorry.
What is that? You repeat, sir?
Vanita says there's a discrepancy in p-value of fatigue in the table and in results in the. You mean when you say results in the graph, is it, Vanita?
Not in graph, sir. Paragraph, sir. What they have.
Oh, in the paragraph,
described.
in the text, I see. I had missed that. Okay. We'll have to check that, but that's okay. But Nishant has a very solid point. Recurrence rate is very high, 30% in the non-closure group. You know, that is difficult to believe. Usually your standard is about 3 to 5%. But having a 30% recurrence in one arm and then claiming your recurrence rate is less in the other because you suture it, I think is something we have to think about. Niranjan says, I think it is due to the technique where they are fixing in the mesh using only tackers. Yeah, that may be an explanation, but the fact is that 30% recurrence rate for a non-closure group is very high. That is a point well
Sir,
taken.
even in the defect closure group, it is around 17 to 18%.
We have made, you're right.
But there also it is very high.
Correct. That's right. That's very true. Next, go on, Saurav. Show the critique point that we have made. Yeah, go on.
So there was strict adherence to the protocol. There was honest data collection. Endpoints were evaluated critically. Good statistics were followed. They followed the intention to treat principle, and a good follow-up. Almost 73 of the 78 patients were followed up till the end of two years. In critique against, there was high rate of seroma formation. Out of 30, 22 patients had developed a seroma in the non-closure group, and out of 44 patients in the closure had high recurrence.
Yeah. So the point we're making is both the incidence of both seroma formation and recurrence is very high in their study. And that is a big issue about this study, in my view. Okay, any other comments, please?
Recurrence rate may be because of the mesh also, sir. They use physio mesh.
Yeah.
It was prone to go for fracture.
Yeah.
So that's why they withdrawn that mesh.
Yeah.
And that may be the reason for the high recurrence rates.
That's true, but the fact remains that the value of this overall value of the study gets compromised because of this high recurrence rate. Nishant asks what was done for the seroma. I don't think they have mentioned it here, Nishant. Have they?
No, they haven't mentioned.
They haven't mentioned.
No, they have not mentioned.
All right, go ahead, Saurabh.
Yes. So coming to discussion, the closure of a facial defect did not increase early postoperative pain. However, it reduced the incidence of seroma formation and long-term hernia recurrence. Apart from postoperative fatigue, other patient-reported outcomes were not affected by closure of the defect. There were no significant effect on the cosmosis or the quality of life, and no adverse effects were recorded. So in the study by Sitola and colleagues, they found significant higher VAS pain activity scores after defect closure, but with no difference in pain scores after 2, 3, and 30 days. In another study, they found no difference in pain scores after 2 years, but did not determine VAS scores in the early postoperative phase. Fatigue has been associated with pain and surgical stress response, and higher early fatigue scores in the closure group may reflect this. All patients received preoperative dexamethasone, which has an anti-inflammatory and analgesic effect and should reduce early fatigue and pain after minor surgical procedures. In the present study, the defect closure group had significantly fewer seromas than the non-closure group, and sutured closure aims to leave no dead space in the previous hernia sac. When we look at the limitations that they have mentioned, they said that the size of the study was hampered by excluding defects smaller than 2 centimeters or larger than 6 centimeters. Small and large defects are regarded by most surgeons as suited for open procedures. did not include high-risk patients. The study was not powered to investigate either recurrence or seroma, thus overestimating the benefit of closure. The concomitant rectus diastasis was not registered in any of the patients in the study, and the hernia sac was not excised in any of the groups. Seroma formation was not recorded formally or assessed by imaging. Bulging of the mesh was not defined as a recurrence.
All right, any comments?
I think two problems in this study. One is they have not removed the sac, because of that seromas are high, and also mesh bulging may be high.
Yeah.
And physiomesh, of course, I think that is the problem in this study, which was later withdrawn.
Yes.
And the size of the mesh, if you don't close the defect, and then we have to use a very huge mesh. Like if you have a 6 centimeter defect, then you have to come on either side at least 6 centimeter. That side, it becomes a very huge mesh. I don't think they have used such huge mesh in this study also.
Yeah, point taken, point taken. Srikanth, you asked about treatment of recurrence. They have not mentioned anything about it here, Srikanth. In this study, we have no information on that. And Abdul asks, what is the best way to assess seroma, clinically or ultrasound? I think it has to be, if you're doing a study, it has to be by ultrasound. You must quantify the size and the volume of the fluid in the seroma. And Shivaram makes the point that there is too much emphasis on fatigue, which is true. Nishant, say whatever you have written there. Go on. Nishant, you want to say
Audible,
something?
sir?
Yeah, go on,
Yes,
go
sir.
on.
Sir, because they have mentioned almost all complications,
Yeah.
so if the seroma was pretty large enough, which required aspiration, I am assuming they would have mentioned that in the paper as well.
Yes.
So even though high number of seromas, what they have actually seen might have been a very small quantity of seroma which didn't require any attention. So overall, if the patient had better pain scores and all, so whether he had a small 5 ml seroma, it doesn't matter because you're not doing anything for it.
Very
So
true.
too much emphasis should not be put on that.
Correct, correct, correct. Very true. That's a point which has to be considered. Yes. Calculation of P are questionable. Ramakrishna, can you come in on that, please?
Sir, I took the table number 2, what they have mentioned. I took these figures and wherever possible, I tried to recalculate using our calculators.
Okay.
Almost all of them where they have said significant,
Yeah.
they are coming non-significant, not
Oh, I see.
significant. P-value more than 0.05.
Amazing,
For
amazing.
me.
Yeah.
I don't know why this discrepancy is there.
Okay.
Maybe if you ask your statistician, they will tell whether he is correct or I am correct.
That
I
is a
don't
very,
know.
very
Our
important
calculator, yeah, almost all this outcome after 2 years. That also, even if you use ITT, it comes p-value 0.12. If you don't follow ITT and use the 36 and 37, which are the actual follow-up cases, we again get 0.13. Both are more than 0.05, not significant. And even the other 30-day outcome, there also again we are getting p-value more than 0.05. And they have mentioned they are significant. I don't know why it has come. Maybe we have to check it again.
This happening from BJS is really something we need to look into. But let's see how it is. Maybe we should check it again and do something about it. Okay. Mahesh, you say both are important. What are you referring to, please, here? Mahesh, are you there?
Hello.
Yeah,
sir.
go on, Mahesh.
What the clinical diagnosis of seroma as well as the radiological.
Fair enough, fair enough. Both are important. Yeah. All right. Okay. But when you're doing a study, you need to quantify it. That was the point I was trying to
Quantify is
make.
very important. Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
And
Otherwise-
Vanita asks for a little more information about intention to treat analysis. Ramakrishna, please come in.
Yeah, intention to treat analysis means if you start with certain number after allocation to groups,
Yeah.
That should remain till the end while analyzing also. The classic example I used to tell in our workshop is, suppose you have 100 patients in each group and 5 patients died, another 10 patients lost for follow-up and all those things, and ultimately you are left with only 80 patients. And the effect, what you are measuring, it may be 5% result. Then what is the percentage is 5 by 80 or 5 by 100? This is the question comes. If you are following ITT, it should be 5 by 100 because you started with 100. Even though your follow-up and all, at the end of the follow-up, you are left with only 80 patients. You should not quote 5 by 80 as the effect. You should say 5 by 100. This is ITT. If you say 5 by 80, that becomes MITT or per protocol, what they say.
But why do
I
they
hope
say
I
that?
am-
Can you explain why they say it should, all of them should be included?
Because it introduces bias. So if the investigator wants to push one of the groups, what he does, he will suppress the bad results in one of the groups and he will try to exclude all those patients. So if this is insisted, then he, even if he exclude also, he will be having the denominator as the original number.
Total
only.
number. Exactly.
Total number. So you bias factor will be minimized when you follow ITT. The main idea of using ITT is to avoid bias.
Shivaram makes the point that Ramakrishna, you should write to BJS about this and ask for a clarification. Yeah, perhaps you could see it again. And sorry, what is the date of this paper, Saurav? I forget.
February 20.
February
This year only,
20,
February it was
2020. Well, it's
Yes.
worth it. It's very, very newly published. And so, Ramakrishna, please think about it.
Sir, we have to take opinion from your statistics sir, before.
All right. We might. Okay. Saurav.
Because even he
Yes.
has mentioned
Yeah.
to say significant,
Yeah.
it has come almost to 0.05. See, the number he has quoted is 0.047.
Yeah.
So if you 7, if you put it this side, it becomes 0.05 only. Exactly,
Yeah,
it is
yeah.
standing at that point. That's why I
Point.
got doubt.
Yeah.
And then I recalculated everything, all the figures, because if it is continuous variable, I cannot calculate because I will not have the complete data. But when dichotomous variable like seroma formation and recurrences are there, from the table I can take out that number and calculate using our standard calculators, what I was showing in the workshop. Same calculator I have used, and I got totally different values.
Yeah. Now, Srikanth asks, do all seromas need aspiration? No, the answer is no. Only when it is uncomfortable, very big, or infected, these would be the common indications for aspiration of a seroma. Any mesh infection? Yeah, I think Vanita has answered that. No, they didn't look for mesh infection. Is that correct, Saurav?
Yes, they didn't look for it.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't any. I'm sure they were looking for it, but there wasn't.
Sir, one intracutaneous.
Only one fistula, that took 2 weeks. 2 weeks after that. It's too early, isn't it? It surprised me a little bit.
Yes.
2 weeks is very, very early for them to have an intracutaneous fistula. Yeah. Anyway, okay, go ahead, Saurav. Please proceed.
Yes, sir. So the critique for is they had included a comprehensive list of limitations which were acknowledged, and I didn't find anything against this.
Because we had listed everything earlier, but just because they acknowledge a huge list of limitations doesn't make me they're honest, but it does take away from the quality or the value of the study. Yeah, go on.
So they had concluded that the closure of a facial defect in laparoscopic umbilical hernia, IPOM repair, significantly reduced early seroma formation and long-term recurrence without inducing side effects such as pain or early or late patient-related complaints. However, I had done some collateral reading in a retrospective non-randomized study by Saijo and colleagues. Compared the quality of life of 33 patients who underwent laparoscopic ventral and incisional hernia repairs with facial defect closure versus non-closure. The quality of life as assessed by the SF36 was compared before the surgery and 1 year after the surgery. He showed that there was, even though seroma formation was more in the IPOM compared to the IPOM plus patients, the postoperative pain was more in the IPOM plus, and the quality of life after 1 year was similar in both the groups. In a study by Duncan, they showed that the closure of defect reduced postoperative seroma formation and recurrences compared with the non-closure group. They, however, mentioned that the percutaneous transfacial sutures are superior to intracorporeal sutures, as a larger area of fascia may be taken in each suture. Knots may also be tied with balanced tension in the anatomical position, which is not possible in cases of intracorporeal technique. A review article was I had also gone through, which had examined 16 different papers on closure versus non-closure of facial defect in laparoscopic surgery. And as it had included complications like recurrence rate, incidence of seroma formation, and incidence of mesh bulging. All these studies seem to suggest that IPM plus is associated with more favorable surgical outcomes. However, they also say that larger scale studies are essential. So the jury is still out if we should suture the defect or not.
Okay. So this essentially brings, the journal club to a close. But before we really close, can I ask closing comments or views from some juniors and some seniors? Namita, what do you have to say?
Sir, before that, one small doubt.
Really?
This study shows the closing of the defect has a long-term better outcome regarding recurrence.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
No,
Can the same principle be applied to inguinal hernia also?
No. Please, you have to have separate studies for inguinal hernia. There's no question of comparing. Umbilical hernia is not comparing. Of transferring the results of umbilical hernia to inguinal hernia. All right. Okay. Now, Vanita says, should IPOM plus, in conclusion, also underwent IPOM without defect closure? I didn't understand that. Vanita, what is your question again?
So, sir has mentioned like it is IPOM, sir.
Yeah.
So that should be IPOM plus.
No, there was IPOM also without a closure defect, no? That is IPOM.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it had both IPOM and IPOM plus in this group. Shivaram makes the point that present standard of care is IPOM plus. All right. Namita, do you have any comments on this? Is she there? No, go on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Go on. Do you want to counter your boss's observation that IPOM plus is the standard of care?
I think it's always better to close the defects, sir.
You agree with him. All right. Nishant, what is your view?
We don't have experience with closing the defect, but whatever long-term outcome we have without closing the defect are as good as what the other studies show.
That paper will come out in the next 2 months. We are analyzing 200 and odd of our patients on ventral hernias, and we use only IPOM. We don't use IPOM plus. And I can tell you, we'll share the results with you. I think that will speak for itself. Ravi?
Sir, I think the paper has, it set out to do something, but it has not achieved it.
Yeah.
And I think unfortunately it's kind of muddied the water. It could have either sat on one side of the fence or the other, but it is not been able to be decisive. I think the initial observation that I made, among 550 patients, they could have selected the patients better, so that they could have powered the study to show whether there is any difference in recurrence. And again, the first thing was, I think the laparoscopic ventral hernia repair came in because the recurrence rates with open repair was so high. And if you have recurrence rates in the 17 to 30%, I think you have no business doing laparoscopic hernia repair, because the recurrence rates have to be less than 5%.
Anyway, let us close this discussion. It's been a very interesting topic and a very interesting
Sir,
discussion.
last point.
Yeah, go on.
Last one point. Sir, this study is totally irrelevant for our present clinical practice, sir. One thing, we already mentioned the sample size. The second thing is, they have used PhysioMesh, and it is not at all available now.
Yeah.
So, based on this study, we cannot do any surgeries in this. And in the end, author has not concluded at all. He has not given any conclusions at the end of the article. What is his view after studying this? Whether he is recommending this or he is not recommending this. That conclusion is not there in the article. It just ends when discussion ends.
Yeah. Shivaram, you have something to add?
No, I think that's all.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. Good night, all of you. I think it's been a very nice discussion, and I hope all of you will join us for our subsequent Journey Club also and have equally fruitful discussions. Thank you and good night.
Sir, one last point, sir.
Yeah.
So when
Go
I
on.
went through for the, the debate in the Karnataka State Chapter Bangalore conference,
Yeah.
I went through a lot of papers about, the advantages of IPOM plus and the abdominal wall reconstruction.
Yeah.
I think as of now, there isn't any strong 1A or 1B recommendation about IPOM or IPOM plus as of now. So
Yeah.
that is, Shivram says that current this one is care, but I didn't find any strong evidence to say, yes, everyone has to switch to IPOM plus.
Yeah, I mean, in defense of Shivram, the definition of standard of care is what most people follow. All right, and so some of us may not follow what others follow, but either way, the reason I brought it up was even such a simple question like umbilical hernia can have a lot of controversies, and postgraduates must have that in mind, must have the technique of analyzing and discussing and working out the data to come to a conclusion themselves as and when they become consultants. They must follow the procedure that is they're most comfortable with, and that they're confident will give good results to the patient. Controversies will always be there. It's a part of surgical life, and we should respect each other's view. All right. Thank you and good night.
Sir,
for
to
your
add to
participation.
this thing, what Shivram sir meant was probably because of most hernia societies recommend IPOM plus.
All right. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Very
good night,
nicely,
folks. Yeah.
very nicely conducted. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you,
Lakshmi.
sir. Thank you very much. Good night, folks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good
Right,
night.
sir.